Hello developers, welcome back to iCoded. In this video, we're going to talk about IntersectionObserver. This is a browser feature that enable you to do a lot of interactions. The IntersectionObserver API provides a way to asynchronously observe changes in the section of a target element and the viewport, which normally means the body of the HTML page. IntersectionObserver allows you to do a lot of interesting interactions. For example, the lazy loading of images. For example, if you have a blog post and it has a lot of several big images in a long form article, but you don't want to load all the images initially. So as users scroll to the particular area of the article, you start to load the image at that point. So it will make the initial page load very fast. Another popular feature is infinity scrolling. For example, you have a Twitter or LinkedIn, whatever the feeds. So it's a timeline. Normally it's infinite, and as you scroll, it load more, and you reach to the bottom or near to the bottom, it start to load new content. So it can allow the better user experience and better performance. So in this video, we're going to talk about how we can easily use the IntersectionObserver in a React component. So I'm not going to touch all the lazy loading or pagination for more content, but you will learn the fundamental concept of the IntersectionObserver API. So in the later on video, we can talk about the infinite scrolling, that like pagination, so we can implement something very interesting like a Twitter timeline feature. But that will be a next step. So in this video, we're going to only touch the IntersectionObserver API, the fundamental concepts first. All right, so there are a few elements or concepts here we need to be clear first. So the first one is called root. That's the viewport. Normally, by default, in an IntersectionObserver API, it's the root element of the DOM, which is considered of the body, and you can set a particular area as the root. So that's the first element you will need. The other one is a target. So target could be something that is not, it's like outside of this root rectangle. And as you scroll, the target will be firstly it has an intersection and it is fully overlap. And then as you scroll, it will be out of this rectangle. So you remember that root is the thing, is like a window, it doesn't move, and a target will be the thing that intersecting with this root area. So that's how normally you visualize it. So there are a few key concepts in Observer API. So initially you will need an object called IntersectionObserver. It accepts two parameters, a callback and options. We'll address the callback in a minute, but first let's talk about the options. So the options has a few elements here. So obviously the first thing is the root. That's the root concept here we just talked about. So by default, it's a viewport of your browser window. But you can specify which element you want it to be the root. And the root margin is an option that you can define to either enlarge or shrink the actual area of the root element. Sometimes you want to trigger the load more action before the target actually reached the root intersection. So it before it reach to the root element, root rectangle, you just make some buffer to that. And the threshold is how many percentage they overlap of the target and the root will be. When you set the threshold as 0, that means it's very accurate, and whenever the target is just reached to the root rectangle, it triggers the observer. On the other hand, the 1 is 100%. That means the whole target is moved into the root. That will trigger the observer. We will see this in action in a minute, but this is how you normally would use the observer to initialize the observer object. Yeah, to initialize the intersection observer, you need two parameters. One is a function, a callback function, and the other is the options. The options defines the behavior of the observer. Let's talk about the threshold a little bit more. So the threshold is like just like as we said, it's just how accurate the two intersection will be. Let's say you have a target beneath the root element, and some of them are like on top of them. And as you scroll, and if you set the threshold at 0, and when you move the target just like intersecting with the root, it will trigger the callback function. This is when you set it 0, and you can set it as like 0.5 or 50%. That means only when the callback will be only triggered when the intersection is just reached to 50% of the target element. And yeah, the 1 is like it's totally completely visible in the root. So this is how you do the thresholding. The other one is the root margin. So if you set that as a positive value, like 20 pixels, you can think of that it enlarges the intersecting area. So now the root is not anymore this solid line, it's a dashed line here. So if the threshold is 0 now, it's already triggered, even it's not reached to the actual border. So that's because we have the margin 20 pixels already. And similarly, you can set the margin as a negative value. That means it shrink the area. So for example, you can set it at minus 20 pixels, and when you scroll, it will trigger only when it reach over the border and reach to the actual dashed line here. But that's pretty much about the code concepts here. And let's talk about the next step when you have the intersection object. Let's talk about the intersection callback. So callback accepting a entries list. That means the elements that are intersecting with the root. And for all the entries, you can check if it's intersecting at the moment. If it does, you can get the element by entry or target. That's the actual element that intersecting with the root. And then you can do something interesting with the element. For example, you can fetch the remote data or lazy load image. This is the callback that will constantly being called when the intersection are happening. So once you have this callback, you have the observer created, and then the next step is register the observer. So normally you would do you get the target element, and then you call observer.observe target, and then whenever the target change the position, it will trigger the observer callback. Yeah, this is pretty much about the concept and how to use the API. And next, let's see how we can apply this API in our React application. I have a very simple application already up and running in my local. It's a list. So it's a code list. It has a few famous people said something. And we will convert this as a kind of like a infinite scrolling application, but we're not actually fetching any data from the remote yet. So Yeah, this is a list. You can probably imagine that the implementation is a OL and each element is a LI. That's pretty much what the actual component does. So we have an array of codes, and we do a map, and we just render the content of the code. And yeah, that's pretty much about the list. And let's just add a few things to the container element to make it more visualized. So that will be our root. Let's do a border, 1 pixel, solid. Let's do deep dark, the pink. Let's remove this one, and we can see that nice border here. And to make that a like an intersectable element, normally we will make that a max height as 300 pixels. And now it's overlapping. That's all good. And we just make a overflow auto to add a scroll bar. So now it's just like a typical. So now it's a typical scrollable list, right? So now if we go back to our application, if we want to use the observer API to see how we can load more elements. So obviously we will need a target because we have already got this root element, and we will need a target somewhere. The easiest way will be we put the a li element. Let's say it's load more, and we can give it a class. Let's say it's trigger, right? And if we scroll to the bottom, we can see that element here. But obviously, it's not a real. It shouldn't be a real. What do you call that? The element. We only want it to be triggered when we scroll to the bottom. So as we want to access the DOM element, the root element here, so we will need a reference. Let's do that. And reference. Okay, so we'll put into the ref here. Obviously, it will be a non-able. We'll do the HTML dev element, and initially it will be now. Right. So we will put that inside a use effect block. Obviously, we will check if the ref current exists. If it doesn't, we just return. Then we have the root element. We can create the options first. So let's say options. The root will be. So the root element will be the root current. So for threshold, we can put it as 1 for now. That means completely available. And then we will need to create the observer by using the IntersectionObserver. And we will need a callback first here. We'll just put the empty function here and then pass in the options. This is how you initialize it. And obviously, we will need to observe the target trigger element. Let's say we use a query. Let's say we use a document, the query element selector, the trigger, dot trigger, and we can give it a name as trigger, right? And we have the observer, and then we can use observer.observe trigger. Observer.observe trigger. That will be register the observer. And in the use effect, we want to return the cleanup function that will unregister everything. So let's do return a function that observer disconnect that will unregister all the triggers or like whatever you're observing. So this is a good habit to have. So now we have a use effect block. It has everything we need here. And we will cast that as a HTML dev element. All right. So we have the options. We can set the margin as something, but for now, let's just make it a 0, which is the default value. And now the next thing is to define the actual behavior of the observer. So let's do it here, entries. And for all the entries, for each entry, we can do something interesting here. Let's say if the entry is intersecting, so we can get the target element here by saying entry target, and we can simply console log the element inner HTML, for example. So obviously we are observing the trigger. So if everything goes well, it's connected, and when we scroll to the bottom, we will be able to see this load more content in the console log, right? So let's give it a try. Okay, it seems like we need to specify a pixel here. So do here, pixel. All right. So in the console log, let's enlarge it a little bit. And if I scroll to the bottom, you can see load more shows up here. And if I do it again, it will show twice. If I do it one more time, it load more. That's pretty much about how the observer is working. But now let's do something more interesting. So we have the observer already, and we have this callback. So let's observe a few more elements. Let's say we want to listen all the query elements all. We want to intersecting the list item as well. So .list item. So they will get all the list items. Let me do a list items. And for each of them, which is the item, we want to observer to observe this item. So now when the list item is scroll into the root element, it will also trigger the intersecting, and then it will also do the element inner HTML. It will console log that. So now we are expecting that we can see some initial 5 or 4 elements in a console first, and as we scroll, we can see more content coming up into the console log. So as you can see, let's do a refresh. We can see 4 of them. This is pretty much the top 4, but the success is working from failure to failure with no lose is not showing up. That's because we set the threshold as 1, and the last element here is not completely shows up yet. Sorry, it's not fully intersecting yet, so that's why it's not showing up in a console log. But if as we scroll, once the success is working item shows up completely, it will be console logged in the browser here. So let's do that. We can scroll slowly, and now you see it's just fully visible. So you can see the success is working, it's been printed, and if we keep scrolling, it will print out on the console, and then the bottom one will be the last one. So at this point, we could do something interesting, like we want to actually fetching more elements from the server side, right? But another thing I'd like to call out here is if we scroll back to the top, you can see that will be the element is triggered again. And if we scroll down, scroll up, scroll down, scroll up, scroll down, it's always like triggering. That's kind of annoying because normally we don't want to re-trigger the one that has already been saved. In such cases, you will need to unregister your target, so it will not be observed anymore. So we will need to do something here. Let's say if the element though, so let's say if the class name though includes dot list item, if it has this element, we will just say, okay, observer, please unobserve this element because I don't want to be triggered multiple times. So now let's give it another try. So if we scroll to the bottom and back down, and it doesn't work. I think it's because we are not using the correct API here. Oh, sorry, it should be include list item, not dot list item. So if you scroll to the bottom and back down, you can see only the load more being triggered multiple times. Whenever we scroll to the bottom, we will trigger the load more. But for the rest of the elements, we just unregister them once we have seen them. To summarize, you will need a options for the observer, and then you will need a callback. So in a callback, you will need to do something more interesting, like fetching more data from the server, things like that. And then once you have the observer defined, you can observe or register as many targets as you like. And don't remember to disconnect all the observers when you clean up your component, just like using the effect, just make it that as a return function, so it will clean up everything. But yeah, that's pretty much about this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any question regarding the React code interview, either the code interview or system design interview, and any ideas, the question you were asked in your interview, but you don't know how to answer, or like you want to know how I would answer it, please leave a comment below, and I will address them in the following videos. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next time.